Hello, friends. Tonight we step off the map and into a suspended reality. A restless, blinding expanse of white where the trail has dissolved and the wind has taken over as the only navigator. Picture yourself standing beside the towering wheel of a covered wagon. The daylight is failing, thinning out into a bruised charcoal gray as the snow begins to drive horizontally, cutting through the air parallel to the frozen ground. The canvas roof above you exhales the scent of damp cotton and ancient dust. Your boots break the crust of the snow with a muted, satisfying crunch, and the air you breathe is so crisp it feels like shattered glass in your lungs. Ahead, the horizon you plan to chase has simply ceased to exist. The land has folded in on itself. Tonight, survival is not a grand heroic gesture. It is a quiet, stubborn act of endurance, just enough to greet the morning light. Before you surrender to the shelter, take a brief moment to support this channel by liking the video and subscribing, but only if my stories help you find the edge of sleep. As you settle into your own bed, tell me in the comments, where are you drifting off from tonight, and what is the hour on your clock? Now, dim your lights, unclench your jaw, let your eyes grow heavy. The story is moving forward, and it is time to go inside. You haul yourself up, finding the iron step just as a violent gust slams against the wagon. The wood is slick with ice, and your heavy leather glove slides along the side rail until your grip finally holds. You pull your weight inside, and instantly, the universe contracts. The interior is darker than the twilight outside suggests. This is the reality of the prairie schooner, a space that was never truly designed for the stillness of sleep, but for the constant vibration of the journey. Yet, this 4 by 10-foot wooden box is where you must lay your head. This is your sanctuary, while the blizzard outside memorizes the contours of your shelter. You arrange your limbs with deliberate care. In this confined space, there is no luxury of carelessness. The floorboards beneath you are unforgiving, hard hickory wood pressing up through your blankets. We often romanticize these vessels in films, but historical analysis reminds us of a harsher truth. These wagons were essentially baskets woven of wood and iron, devoid of insulation. There is no padding between you and the elements, only a thin skin of cotton duck canvas, waterproofed with linseed oil, stretched taut over bent wooden bows. You can hear the storm reacting to it. The canvas creates a low, rhythmic flapping, like a ship's sail that has lost the wind and is drifting in a dead calm. As the snow accumulation deepens, the light is stolen away with unfair speed. You feel the temperature plummeting, not in sudden shocks, but with a relentless liquid gravity. The cold here doesn't knock, it seeps. It is a convection current that seeks out the hollows of your collarbone and the spaces between your fingers. You instinctively tuck your hands into your armpits, shifting your hips to relieve the pressure of the floor. The air inside is thick with a specific historical perfume. The heavy scent of cured animal grease from the axles, the remnants of a sagebrush fire, and wet, lanolin-rich wool. It is a heavy scent, grounding you in a reality that offers protection, but strictly denies comfort. The wind gathers its strength again, hissing against the canvas with a sound like dry sand on paper. The fabric billows inward, invading your space, before snapping back tight. This auditory rhythm becomes a presence in the dark. You realize that true silence is a ghost tonight. You are destined to listen to the storm's monologue. There is a fascinating, obscure detail found in the diaries of overland travelers that feels poignant now. Some pioneers, during nights of heavy weather, would tie small brass bells or scraps of tin to the wagon's interior ribs. This wasn't to ward off predators, but to soothe the human mind. As long as the bells chimed gently, the sleeper knew the wagon was upright, merely breathing in the wind. You have no bells. You have only the creaking wood and your own regulated breathing. You recline as best you can. Your head finds a pillow in a folded buffalo coat, and you turn your face away from the windward side, where the snow is already banking up against the wood. Every slight adjustment sends vibration through the floorboards. You become hyper-aware of your anatomy, the tension in your knees, the way your shoulders have hiked up toward your ears in a subconscious defense against the chill. You force them down. You adjust slower this time, remembering that in survival situations, unnecessary kinetic energy is just wasted heat. Outside, the geography has vanished. There is no north, no south, no road. Inside, time distorts. The blizzard operates on a chaotic rhythm that ignores the ticking of clocks. Historians and physiologists often debate the true danger of these nights. Was it the hypothermia or the sheer, crushing exhaustion that followed the vigilance of the storm? You can feel that debate playing out in your own tendons, tensing, releasing, tensing. In the near-total darkness, your breath begins to fog. Every exhale leaves a ghostly signature that hangs in the freezing air a second longer than the one before. The humidity rises, collecting on the underside of the cold canvas roof. Occasionally, a single icy tear of condensation breaks free, landing sharply on your sleeve. That cold drop hits your skin, and your body flinches instinctively. It is a small, wet shock, but it serves as a sharp physical reminder of just how fragile the membrane is between you and the fury of the storm. You attempt to steer your mind toward warmer thoughts, memories of home, or perhaps the promise of the morning sun. But your mind circles back like a hawk to the same silent, gnawing question. Will this be enough? Is there enough canvas, enough wool, enough sheer stubbornness to see this through? If you read the journals of those who crossed the plains, you rarely find entries about sleeping well during a blizzard. They wrote about enduring. Feel the weight of that word settle into your bones. Enduring is different from resting. Resting is passive. Enduring is an active state of staying present. As the blizzard intensifies, the wagon rocks beneath you, not violently, but with a sway just perceptible enough to remind you that nothing in this white void is fixed. The wooden ribs of the cover groan under the strain. You can sense the snow packing against the lower wheels, building a drift inch by inch. You begin to calculate the weight, but you stop yourself. Imagining the worst is a waste of precious energy. Instead, you force your focus inward, grounding yourself in the micro details of existence, the rhythm of your own shallow breathing, the rough friction of the fabric against your wrists, the faint, localized warmth where your legs press together. You deliberately slow your heart rate. Sleep will not arrive quickly tonight, but you are negotiating with the night, hour by hour. You are not conquering the storm, you are simply agreeing to outlast it. As you lie there, listening to the canvas speak in the chaotic language of the wind, the reality of the space begins to close in. The longer you remain still, the more you realize how tight the quarters truly are. You shift an elbow, and it immediately strikes a sidewall that radiates a cold more intense than the air itself. The wagon does not forgive wasted space. Every available cubic inch has been claimed by crates of flour, tools, bedding, and bodies. It is the simple, ruthless geometry of survival. You curl inward, making yourself smaller because expanding is no longer an option. This is how the night teaches you restraint. You begin to understand that sleeping in a covered wagon is less about lying down and more about fitting in like a puzzle piece. Your spine presses against uneven oak boards. There is a knot in the wood, a hard, distinct lump just below your shoulder blade. You make a mental note to shift away from it, though you know that once the heavy fog of fatigue rolls in, you will likely forget. Your knees remain bent, not for comfort, but because the architecture of the wagon demands it. The vehicle has decided the shape of your rest, and you have no choice but to comply. It is a historical reality often overlooked. The vast majority of immigrant wagons were never designed as living quarters. They were farm wagons or modified freight vehicles, adapted out of necessity rather than design. On fair nights, travelers slept under the stars or beneath the wagon bed. Sleeping inside, enclosed like this, was an act of desperation reserved for the harshest weather. Tonight, however, desperation feels strangely practical. The wind outside is far too predatory to consider any alternative. As the storm matures, the interior of the wagon develops its own auditory landscape. In the darkness, every sound is amplified. A boot shifts against wood near your feet. A heavy wool blanket slides with a dry, static whisper. Someone nearby exhales sharply, shifts, and settles again. These are small, mundane noises, but in the pitch black they feel intimate and unavoidable. You are sharing air, warmth, and discomfort in a way that dissolves solitary boundaries. A strange, unspoken etiquette emerges in these cramped spaces. You learn the rules without ever being told. You move with exaggerated slowness. You avoid sudden, jerking turns. If your elbow strays too far and bumps a companion, you apologize in a soft murmur. Privacy has evaporated. In its place is a communal agreement to ignore what must be ignored. Faces turn away. Eyes remain squeezed shut even when sleep is miles away. This quiet cooperation, this collective patience, is often the invisible glue that held groups together through nights like these. There is a lesser-known detail found in some trail logs that speaks to the sheer physical toll of these storms. Some pioneers mention sleeping sitting up, with their backs pressed against the wagon wall and knees drawn tight to their chests. They did this simply because the floor was too crowded or too cold to lie flat. It reduced the body's surface area contact with the freezing boards. You try this position for a moment. Your lower back protests immediately, and your neck strains under the weight of your head. You last only a few minutes before slowly lowering yourself back down, resigned to the chill of the floorboards. Above you, the canvas flexes under a fresh assault of wind, and the entire frame shudders. Snow is beginning to bank high along the canvas edges, acting as a paradoxical force. It is a threat, weighing down the structure, but it is also an insulator, sealing the gaps against the drafts. You wonder briefly how much load the hickory bows can bear before they begin to sag inward, but you push the thought away, exhaling slowly into the dark. You realize, with a sudden clarity, that there is no benefit in measuring a danger you cannot change. Your hands instinctively retreat into your sleeves, pulling the heavy cuffs down as far as they will stretch. In these temperatures, the extremities are the first to send distress signals. The fingers stiffen, followed closely by the toes. You wiggle them gently inside your boots, a microscopic motion, careful not to disturb the person beside you. It is a delicate biological negotiation. Movement generates heat, but too much exertion invites perspiration. And in this climate, moisture is a traitor that turns to ice against the skin. You are mastering the art of balancing effort with absolute stillness, a skill that feels unnatural to the restless human mind. There is a peculiar, muffled comfort in realizing you are not the only one awake. You cannot see your companions in the obsidian dark, but you can sense them, the subtle shifts in weight, the rhythm of respiration. No one is sleeping deeply yet. The wagon holds a collective vigilance. This shared wakefulness transforms into a silent companionship. You are not facing the void alone. You are a small, fragile ecosystem waiting for the night to loosen its grip. Historians who study the migration trails often debate what factor was most critical for survival. Was it the caloric intake, the quality of the gear, or the social cohesion of the group? Was it the extra buffalo hide, or the willingness to endure discomfort for the sake of another? Lying here, pressed against the shoulder of a companion, the answer feels less abstract. You suspect survival is a tapestry woven from both practical supplies and human solidarity. The olfactory landscape inside the wagon deepens as the hours stretch on. The air is heavy with the scent of damp wool, cured leather, and the faint, sour note of unwashed bodies. It is not a pleasant bouquet, but it is undeniably human, and it serves to anchor you in the present moment. Outside, the world has been erased by the whiteout. Inside, everything is visceral and real. Your breath, the thrum of your own heartbeat in your ears, the quiet rustle of a neighbor turning over, trying and failing to find a softness in the wood. You adjust your position again, sliding a folded blanket beneath your hip bone to soften the relentless pressure of the floor. It helps, marginally. Tonight, you learn to celebrate the smallest of increments. A slightly better angle for your shoulder, a trapped pocket of warmth near your knees. These are victories. In the daylight, they would seem trivial, but in the dark, they are everything.
As time drifts forward, your thoughts begin to decelerate. This isn't because you are comfortable, but because your body has switched into a mode of conservation. You stare into the vast darkness behind your eyelids. Hypnagogic images begin to float by without your bidding. A stretch of the Platte River you crossed days ago. The outline of a distant hill now buried in drifts. The vivid memory of a campfire that feels impossibly far away. You wonder how many nights like this were endured in silence, never recorded in journals, remembered only in the stiffness of joints and a quiet morning gratitude for having opened one's eyes. The wagon creaks again, settling deeper into the accumulating snowpack. You listen, tense for a moment, and then relax when the structure holds. Eventually, you stop trying to optimize your position. There is nothing left to adjust. You accept the shape the wagon has forced you into. This acceptance, you discover, is a form of rest in itself. It is not sleep exactly, but a surrender that allows the muscles to unlock just enough to get you through the hours ahead.
The storm does not relent. The air does not warm, but you are still here, breathing steadily, molding yourself into a space that was never meant to hold a night like this. And as your awareness softens, you begin to drift toward a shallow, fragile threshold of sleep. As the night deepens, you begin to understand that warmth is not a state you achieve all at once. It is an architecture you build slowly, layer by layer. You reach for whatever materials are within arm's length and begin to arrange them with the precision of a mason. A coat folded twice becomes a mattress. A spare flannel shirt is repurposed as a scarf. Nothing retains its original function. Every object is reassigned to the singular goal of thermal retention. You pull the fabric tighter around your throat and chest, sealing the microscopic gaps where the cold air tries to invade. Clothing in the mid-19th century was formidable by modern standards: heavy serge wool, linsey woolsey, and rough cotton. That density is now your greatest asset. A well-established historical reality is that travelers depended far more on the stratification of clothing than on bedding alone. Blankets were finite, but clothing could be worn, stacked, and reshaped. You feel the weight of these multiple garments pressing down on you. It is heavy, slightly constricting, but reassuring. You tuck the edges of your coat beneath you, creating a crude cocoon to trap the layer of dead air against your skin. The floorboards are heat thieves, constantly trying to conduct your warmth into the frozen ground below, so every millimeter of fabric between you and the wood feels like a strategic triumph. Suddenly, someone near you shifts and wordlessly offers the edge of an extra buffalo robe. You accept it with a slight nod, hoping they can sense your gratitude in the dark. Sharing warmth here is not a sentimental gesture. It is practical, almost mathematical, an equation of survival where the sum of two bodies is greater than the parts. The air inside the wagon grows heavy, saturated not just with trapped heat, but with the humidity of breath and damp wool. You notice the cuffs of your sleeves turning slightly clammy against your wrists. This is the paradox of wool. It is hygroscopic, capable of absorbing moisture while still retaining its thermal resistance. It was the miracle fabric of the frontier, but as it dampens, it grows heavy and prickles against the skin. You reach to scratch your wrist, but stop mid-motion. Even small kinetic movements feel expensive now. Your metabolic energy is a finite currency, and you are budgeting it with the strictness of a banker. A curious tactile detail often found in trail accounts describes travelers stuffing their spare clothing with dried prairie grass, crumpled newspapers, or even wheat straw. They were effectively turning their garments into makeshift organic puffer jackets, creating volume to trap heat. Tonight, you have no straw and no paper, only the clothes on your back and the contents of your trunk. Yet you imitate the spirit of that improvisation, folding and pleating the fabric until the layers create pockets of dead air. You realize now that fabric itself isn't what keeps you warm. It is the air trapped between the weaves. Those invisible, stagnant pockets clinging to your skin are your true shield against the drop in temperature. Your breathing decelerates as you settle into this layered stillness. The storm outside has not softened its fury, but inside the wagon, the cold feels less aggressive. It has transformed from a biting, sharp presence into a dull, surrounding pressure. It retreats from your core, focusing its predatory attention on your extremities, the fingers, the toes, the cartilage of the ears. You pull your felt hat down low, creating a vestibule over your face. By breathing through the rough wool of your scarf, you act as your own heat exchanger, warming the freezing air slightly before it shocks your lungs. You test a new position, carefully sliding one knee closer to your chest to conserve core heat. The layers shift, and for a split second, a draft of icy air knifes through the gaps. You freeze instantly, holding your breath until your body heat warms the new pocket of space. Then you continue the adjustment in microscopic increments. This is how you move now. Slowly, deliberately, like a diver moving underwater. You are learning a new language made entirely of sensation and thermal feedback. The scent of wet wool and unwashed cotton becomes stronger now that the ventilation is sealed off. It is a dense, musky odor, but it signals something vital. These scents mean that bodies are still generating enough heat to produce evaporation. It is a subtle reassurance. The cold that kills is often described as silent, odorless, and numbing. This cold is noisy, busy, and constantly reminding you of its existence, which means you are still fighting it. Scholars and medical historians still debate whether hypothermia was a concept widely understood by name in the mid-19th century, or if pioneers simply recognized the stupor of the cold. Lying here, wrapped in every scrap of textile you own, you suspect most travelers knew exactly what the condition felt like long before science gave it a label. They knew the treacherous drowsiness, the temptation to stop adjusting, the dangerous seduction of stillness.
You fight that temptation gently, not with panic, but with routine. You flex your fingers inside your heavy sleeves. You wiggle your toes just enough to verify they still belong to you. The rhythm becomes a mantra. Move, wait, breathe. The wagon shifts again under the increasing load of the snow, and a long, mournful groan vibrates through the hickory wood. You tighten your layers instinctively, as if the tension in your muscles could brace the structure. You imagine the snow outside acting not just as a weight, but as a barrier. As the drift builds against the wheels, it seals the gaps, muffling the wind and acting as a layer of insulation, much like an igloo. You hope the snow behaves tonight. Your thoughts drift as your body finds its equilibrium. You think about the history of the clothes you are wearing. How many hands touched this fabric before yours? How many winters has this coat already survived? There is a deep comfort in worn fabric. It has structural memory. It has survived other storms, and it lends you its resilience for this one. Someone near your feet coughs softly, a muffled, dry sound, then pulls their covering tighter. The noise reminds you that you are not the solitary architect of this warmth. You are part of a collective effort, a group of people solving the same thermodynamic problem in the dark. No one speaks. There is nothing left to say that the blankets cannot answer. As your layers finally settle into a configuration that feels sustainable, you allow yourself to sink into it. You are not asleep yet, but you are resting. The storm continues its violent work outside, but inside the wooden box, you have constructed a small, fragile island of thermal safety. Constructed from improvisation and necessity, it is imperfect, but it is absolute. You close your eyes, breathing rhythmically through the cloth, letting the heat build and hold. Sometime deep in the night, the sound becomes the protagonist of the experience. It is no longer about the cold or the cramped geometry of the wagon, but the constant shifting voice of the wind working against the canvas. It is never the same tone twice. Sometimes it rushes past in long, hollow exhalations like the breath of a giant. Other times it snaps the fabric sharply, cracking like a whip or a sail caught in a gale. The wagon has developed a voice, speaking in a dialect of dry creaks and soft rhythmic knocks. The wood answers the pressure of the storm the only way it knows how, by shifting. You lie perfectly still and listen, not out of fear, but because listening costs less metabolic energy than worrying. The canvas roof above you breathes with each gust, bowing inward in a heavy arc before snapping tight again. It never quite touches your face, but it dips close enough that you can sense the displacement of the air. The sound is dynamic. It roars when the wind broadsides the wagon, then drops to a whisper when it presses from above. The falling snow adds a muffled hush to the mix, followed by the faint, dry scrape of ice sliding off the fabric. This rhythm replaces silence completely. It becomes the auditory background of your thoughts, the tide upon which you float. Whether you intend to or not, you are learning to read the storm. Historical accounts often mention how travelers on the plains learned to judge the weather by ear as much as by sight. With no barometers and no forecasts, people deciphered wind patterns with the same acuity as sailors reading a sea state. You find yourself doing the same now. A deep, resonant roar suggests open, unprotected ground nearby.
A duller, thudding vibration hints that snowbanks are beginning to form against the wheels, changing the aerodynamics of your shelter. Each variation feels heavy with meaning, even if you cannot fully translate it. You try to visualize the wagon as a complete system, the bent ash bows holding the canvas taut, the hemp ropes that were pulled tight earlier in the day, now frozen stiff, the iron-rimmed wheels, now half-buried, their spokes packed with dense snow. The storm is stress-testing every mortise and tenon joint. You briefly wonder which parts were built in a rush, or which repairs have been made one too many times. Then you stop. That line of thinking leads nowhere useful. There is a strange, forced intimacy to the noise. In the daylight, wind feels impersonal, a force of nature out there. At night, separated from it by only a few millimeters of cotton duck, the storm feels close enough to have intent. It pushes, it probes, it waits. Each violent gust causes your muscles to tense reflexively, followed by a release when the wagon holds its ground. This cycle repeats with such frequency that your body begins to respond automatically. Tension, release, tension, release. There is a poignant detail preserved in the correspondence of some immigrants that describes how families named the specific sounds their wagons made, treating the vehicle like a living companion. A certain rhythmic creak meant the structure was flexing as it should. A sharper, cracking sound meant attention was needed. It sounds almost superstitious, but lying here in the dark, you understand the impulse perfectly. Giving a terrifying sound a familiar name makes it manageable. You start to recognize the patterns yourself. That low groan is just the chassis settling into the mud and ice. That sharp snap is the canvas shaking loose a heavy load of snow. Your breathing begins to synchronize with the rhythm outside. You find yourself inhaling during the momentary lulls and exhaling as the wind returns to batter the sides. It is not an intentional meditation at first, but it becomes soothing. The storm sets the tempo, and you follow it. Sleep remains a distant shore, but your thoughts begin to loosen their rigid grip. You are no longer counting the minutes. You are riding the waves of sound. Occasionally, a stronger blast hits broadside, and the entire wagon shivers noticeably. The floorboards beneath you vibrate like the string of a cello. Someone nearby stirs in their blankets, sighs, and settles again. No one speaks. Words would feel too sharp, too fragile against the volume of the night. Silence, when it appears briefly between gusts, feels startling, almost loud in its absence. There has long been a discussion among historians and psychologists about what wore travelers down faster during these severe weather events, the physical exposure or the psychological strain. Some argue that the constant auditory assault and the hypervigilance did as much damage as the cold itself. Lying awake, your ears tuned to every snap and groan of the wood, you feel the weight of that theory. Your body could endure the low temperature for hours. It is the mental sentry duty that drains you. Your mind tries to wander to warmer memories, but the sound pulls it back every time. A gust catches the canvas at a specific angle, producing a low, mournful moan that vibrates through the wagon frame. It sounds almost like an animal call. You have to remind yourself it is just physics, fabric, and air. Still, your heart rate elevates slightly before settling. You place a hand on your chest, feeling the steady, reassuring thump beneath layers of wool and cotton. As the night progresses, the snow begins to change the acoustics of the space. As the drifts build higher against the wagon sides, the wind loses some of its sharpness. The noise grows deeper, more muffled and resonant. It feels as though the storm is wrapping the wagon in a thick, suffocating blanket of sound. This should be comforting, as it means insulation, but it introduces a new anxiety, weight. You imagine the snow stacking higher, pressing down on the bows, testing the canvas from the outside with gravity instead of wind. You listen intently for signs of structural strain, the tearing of fabric, or a sudden flap that does not recover. None come. The wagon holds, at least for now. You release a breath you did not realize you were holding, and let the heavy, muffled thrum of the buried wagon carry you forward. This small moment of relief feels disproportionately large. Your auditory senses fatigue long before your muscles do, and the relentless, chaotic noise of the storm begins to blur into a monotonous drone, a rough, uneven lullaby. You catch yourself drifting, your thoughts slipping sideways into the hypnagogic state. Images form without effort, a road stretching endlessly into spring, a hearth fire glowing low, the memory of quiet rooms that feel impossibly distant now. Then, a sharp rifle-crack snap of the canvas jerks you back to the present. You tense instantly, holding your breath, but slowly relax when no catastrophe follows. The wagon is still intact. The storm is still raging. Everything is exactly as it was moments ago. You settle again, letting the sound wash over you like a tide. Eventually, you stop listening for danger and start listening for reassurance. Each creak that resolves itself means the structure is still sound. Each gust that passes without tearing the fabric is another small victory. You are learning the language of survival by ear alone. As the night wears on, the sound becomes less something you endure and more something you exist within. It fills the dark completely, leaving no space for fear to echo. Wrapped in layers, pressed close to the heat of others, you float on this ocean of noise and breath, waiting for the storm to decide it has said enough. The cold does not arrive all at once. It does not crash into you or steal your breath in a dramatic, cinematic instant. Instead, it works patiently, like a creature with all the time in the world. You notice it first in the negative spaces, the places where your layers thin, the hollow behind your knees, the curve of your lower back, the gap where your sleeve rides up when you shift. These small openings become invitations, and the cold accepts every single one. At first, it is almost tolerable, a dull ache of background discomfort you think you can ignore. But as the hours stretch on, the sensation changes quality. It grows quieter and deeper, settling into the dense tissue of the muscles rather than just the surface of the skin. You breathe slowly, aware that each inhale brings air that is sharper and heavier than the last. The wagon interior is warmed only by the BTUs of living bodies, and human breath can never quite keep up with the thermodynamics of the blizzard outside. Period journals from winter crossings often describe nights where the cold felt alive, describing it as a presence that crept rather than struck. Travelers didn't speak of freezing as a sudden event, but as a gradual surrender of warmth. Lying here, you understand exactly what they meant. There is no single moment when you think, "Now I am cold." Instead, there is a growing, heavy awareness that warmth requires constant, conscious effort. Your fingers begin to feel thick, as if the joints no longer belong entirely to you, a result of your body pulling blood flow back to the core. You curl them slowly, testing the sensation. They respond, but reluctantly. You tuck your hands deeper into your opposite sleeves, pressing them against your chest where the heat lingers longest. Your toes follow the same pattern, a faint numbness at the tips, followed by a mild pins and needles tingling when you move them. You do not panic. Panic triggers adrenaline, which wastes energy. You respond with small, careful adjustments. There was an implicit understanding among 19th century travelers that sleep itself could be dangerous in extreme cold. People knew, even without modern medical terminology, that losing awareness could mean losing the will to move. Some groups took turns nudging one another awake through the night, keeping a cold watch, especially during severe storms. You wonder briefly if that will be necessary here. For now, everyone remains quiet, caught in the same delicate balance between rest and hyper-alertness. An unusual note from a winter diary once mentioned someone rubbing frozen feet with snow before warming them, a practice that sounds alarming now, but was believed to prevent chilblains or rapid tissue damage by slowing the warming process. Whether it helped or harmed is historically unclear, but it reveals how people experimented constantly, learning survival through trial and error. You are not experimenting tonight. You are conserving. You move only when you must. The cold continues its slow advance. It presses inward, testing your defenses. Your breath grows more deliberate. You count your exhales not out of anxiety, but as a way to anchor yourself in the present. Inhale, pause, exhale. Each cycle creates a small pocket of warmth inside your chest. You imagine holding on to it, shielding it from the night. There remains disagreement among researchers about how often hypothermia claimed lives directly on the trail versus weakening people until other illnesses took hold. Lying here, you sense how easy it would be to underestimate the cold. It does not feel dramatic enough to demand attention. It simply asks you to stop moving, to stop caring. It is a siren song of stillness. You resist that invitation quietly by staying aware of your body. Your jaw tightens slightly as your face cools. You pull the heavy fabric higher, covering your mouth and nose, breathing through the cloth now. The air feels warmer that way, softer. Moisture gathers quickly from your exhalations, dampening the fabric, but you accept that trade-off. Warm breath now is worth cold cloth later. Someone nearby shifts their weight, sending a faint draft of cold air across your ankles. You tense, then relax as the layers settle again. Shared space magnifies every change. You learn to read these disturbances without resentment. Everyone is adjusting. Everyone is negotiating with the same invisible force. The floorboards beneath you feel harder as the night wears on. Cold makes everything more rigid. Wood, leather, flesh. Your hip aches where it presses against the hickory planks. You slide a folded garment beneath it, moving slowly, carefully, until the pressure eases slightly. Relief comes in degrees, not absolutes. At some point, the cold becomes almost familiar, not comfortable, but known. Your body adapts, drawing boundaries around what it can spare. You notice that your core remains warm enough even as your extremities complain. This, you know instinctively, is a good sign. The body is performing physiological triage, making decisions on your behalf. As the storm continues outside, the cold maintains its steady presence. It no longer feels like an enemy charging at you, but like a weight you are carrying. Heavy, constant, but manageable if you move carefully. You do not think about mourning yet. You think only about the next small adjustment, the next breath, the next moment of stillness. You close your eyes again, not expecting sleep, but allowing your thoughts to soften. The cold remains patient and persistent, but you are still here, meeting it inch by inch, breath by breath, waiting for the night to loosen its grip. Your breathing becomes something you notice in high definition now, not just as a rhythm, but as a physical event. Each breath leaves your body and returns changed. The air you inhale feels sharp, thin, and dry. The air you release is warmer, heavier, carrying moisture with it. In the darkness, you cannot see it, but you sense it accumulating. The wagon interior is slowly filling with the evidence of living bodies. As minutes pass into hours, that moisture begins to settle. The underside of the canvas grows damp, first in patches, then more evenly. When the wind presses from outside, tiny droplets shake loose and fall. One lands on your cheek, cold, startling wetness. Another strikes your wrist through your sleeve. You flinch, then still yourself again. These moments are small, but they keep you from forgetting where you are. People traveling in the 19th century often remarked that wagons could feel warmer than the open air, yet wetter at the same time. Breath, sweat, and melting frost had nowhere to go. You are experiencing that thermodynamic truth now. The air smells different, less dry, more lived in. It carries a faint sourness mixed with wool and wood. This is not the clean, sterile cold of the open plains. This is enclosed cold, complicated by human presence. You adjust your breathing without thinking about it at first. Slower inhales, longer exhales. You are trying to act as a heat exchanger, warming the air before it reaches your lungs. Breathing through cloth helps, but it also traps moisture, turning the fabric stiff and cool against your face. You shift the position slightly, exposing one corner to dry air, then covering again. It is a constant, quiet negotiation. From time to time, you hear a soft drip. Condensation has collected enough to fall in larger drops now. Each sound feels louder than it should, echoing in the confined space. Someone stirs nearby, muttering softly, half asleep. You remain still, listening. The wagon holds this shared atmosphere like a sealed container. Everything inside it is amplified. A lesser-known observation from winter journals describes how travelers sometimes cracked open a flap of canvas, despite the freezing temperatures, just enough to let the damp air escape. It seems counterintuitive, but too much moisture could make the cold feel worse. Damp cold bites deeper than dry cold. Tonight, however, no one suggests opening anything. The wind outside is too aggressive, and the risk feels greater than the discomfort. You accept the dampness as part of the price of the night. Your hairline begins to feel cool, a dampness settling there like a heavy morning dew. As the internal temperature dips another fraction of a degree, that moisture chills against your skin. You pull your brimmed hat lower, tucking away stray strands of hair. The felt is no longer soft and pliable. It has stiffened, shaped by the frost of your own exhalations. You press it down gently, careful not to crack the rigid fabric. Discussions among modern historians continue regarding how much internal condensation contributed to illness on these long overland journeys. Damp clothing combined with stagnant, freezing air created the perfect conditions for lung fever and severe coughs. Lying here, breathing air that feels increasingly heavy and saturated, you understand how easily a single night could plant the seeds of sickness. Still, there is no remedy now but endurance. You notice that your breath sounds different inside the confined space of the wagon. It echoes faintly, bouncing off the hardwood ribs and the taut canvas. Each inhale feels louder than it should in the stillness. You try to quiet the sound, breathing more gently, as if the storm might hear you and press harder against the walls. This is not logical, of course, but it is primal. Quiet feels safer. Your chest rises and falls with a steady rhythm. You place a hand there, feeling the furnace of warmth beneath layers of rough cloth. That warmth produces moisture, and that moisture returns to you as cold. It is a relentless thermodynamic cycle. Heat creates dampness, and dampness invites the chill. You are caught in that loop, managing it as best you can with slow, shallow breaths and careful stillness. Someone nearby coughs, deeper this time, a sound that rattles in the chest before they clear their throat. The noise lingers uncomfortably in the dark. You hope it is just irritation from the dry, biting air. Trail throat was common in winter, caused by dehydration and dust, but the noise reminds you how fragile everyone here truly is, how easily a small discomfort can metastasize into a crisis. You shift your head slightly to avoid a cold spot forming beneath your neck. The pillow, or folded coat, has grown noticeably cooler where your skin isn't touching it. When you move, you leave behind a faint ghost of warmth that dissipates almost instantly. You settle again, acutely aware that every surface inside the wagon is slowly trying to reach equilibrium with the freezing night outside. Your thoughts drift toward the simple autonomic act of breathing. How strange it feels to hyper-focus on something you usually do without thinking. Tonight, each breath feels purposeful, measured, and necessary. You wonder how many thousands of people in the past lay awake like this, counting breaths instead of sheep, waiting for the gray light of dawn. The moisture continues to build. You feel it in the weave of your sleeves, in the collar of your shirt, in the faint slickness where layers of fabric press together. You resist the urge to shake the fabric or brush it away. Movement breaks the seal of warm air, cooling you faster. Instead, you press the damp fabric closer to your body, using your own heat to dry it or at least warm it. There remains uncertainty among scholars about the wet cold of the wagons versus the dry cold of the open air. Some believe the dampness accelerated heat loss, while others argue it was an unavoidable side effect of the insulation necessary for survival. Lying here, you suspect both views hold truth. The humidity is uncomfortable, clinging to you like a second skin, but opening the wagon flaps would invite a wind that cuts like a knife. You listen again to the storm. The wind has not relented, but the sound has softened, muffled by the accumulation of snow. The drifts have built up enough to absorb some of the kinetic energy of the gusts. The wagon feels more enclosed now, buried in a cocoon of cold and silence. You breathe steadily, adapting to this altered, heavier air. Eventually, your breathing slows further, not because you are warm or comfortable, but because your body has found a rhythm it can sustain. Inhale, exhale, pause. Each cycle is a quiet promise to the body to keep going. You close your eyes, aware of the moisture gathering, aware of the cold waiting patiently just inches away, and you continue to breathe, trusting that this simple, rhythmic act is enough to carry you through the next hour. As the night deepens, you become increasingly aware that warmth is no longer an individual project. It is a communal resource, shared, traded, and negotiated without words. Bodies pressed close together create pockets of thermal energy that drift and fade as people shift in their sleep. You feel a shoulder near yours, not touching, but close enough to change the temperature of the air gap between you. That narrow strip of space feels different, softer, less sharp than the rest of the wagon. You angle yourself slightly toward it, careful not to intrude, but eager to borrow the heat. In wagon travel, physical closeness was often unavoidable, especially during bad weather. Contemporary descriptions make it clear that the Victorian concept of personal space was a luxury few could afford on the trail. Inside this wooden box, the social rules of distance have been suspended by necessity. You are close enough to sense another person's breathing pattern, close enough to feel the heat radiating faintly through their layers of wool and yours. It is reassuring and uncomfortable all at once. Someone shifts near your feet, and a brief ripple of cold air moves through the bedding before settling again. The warmth rearranges itself, redistributing like water finding a level. You learn quickly that even small movements affect the entire group's thermal balance. This creates a strange, silent courtesy. You move less, not just for your own preservation, but for the shared stability of the heat. Stillness becomes a group effort. The olfactory landscape inside the wagon deepens as bodies remain confined for hours. The smell of wool damped with breath, leather that has been warmed and cooled repeatedly, the faint, earthy trace of last night's meal lingering on clothes. It is not a pleasant bouquet, but it is grounding. These are the smells of life persisting. In some travel journals, writers mentioned that the odor of close quarters, while stifling, was oddly comforting because it meant no one had wandered off into the whiteout. There is an awkwardness to sharing space this intimately. Elbows nearly touch, knees bump lightly against a neighbor, then withdraw. No one speaks about it. There is a silent understanding that comfort must be borrowed carefully. You sense when someone is too cold by the way they inch closer. You feel when they are warm enough by the way they relax back. This quiet, kinetic communication replaces conversation. One small, often overlooked detail from winter travel accounts describes how families would arrange themselves deliberately, placing the most vulnerable, children and the elderly, in the center of the sleeping pile. This thermal core protected them from the biting drafts of the wagon walls. It was rarely described as kindness in the diaries, just as common sense. Heat traveled outward, and survival depended on your geometry. You find yourself unconsciously protecting the warmest parts of your body, curling slightly, shielding your chest and stomach. Your own warmth feels different now, less contained. It bleeds outward, mingling with the collective heat of the wagon. You feel both exposed and supported. The sensation is oddly calming. You are no longer fighting the cold as a solitary entity. You are part of a small, breathing system. Involuntary movement, a sharp intake of breath when someone's cold hand accidentally brushes against bare skin. These moments pass quickly. Apologies are whispered into the dark, or simply implied by a return to stillness. Fatigue smooths over the embarrassment. In the dark, identities blur. You are not names or roles here. You are simply sources of heat. There has been long-standing discussion among historians about how group cooperation influenced survival rates during harsh crossings. Some argue that shared resources, food and fuel, mattered more. Others point to discipline and routine. Lying here, surrounded by faint warmth and quiet breathing, you suspect cooperation was not always a noble, planned choice. Sometimes it was just proximity, forced by the blizzard. Your body begins to respond to the shared warmth. Your muscles loosen their guard slightly. The deep ache in your hip dulls. The cold at your fingertips retreats just enough to be tolerable. You adjust your position one last time, inching closer to the warm air without touching directly. This feels safer, less intrusive. You settle there, breathing slowly. A soft murmur escapes someone nearby, perhaps a fragment of a dream or a reflexive sound of sleep. It fades almost immediately into the hum of the wind. You do not react. Sounds like that feel normal now, part of the wagon's internal life. The storm outside continues its assault, but inside, a different rhythm has formed. Breath, shift, stillness. Your thoughts drift to how strange this would feel in any other context, pressed close to strangers, sharing heat in total silence. Yet here, it feels necessary, almost inevitable. The night has stripped away all unnecessary boundaries and social pretenses. What remains is simple and practical. Stay warm, stay still, stay together. As the hours pass, the shared warmth becomes more stable. The air feels marginally less biting. Not warm, certainly, but workable. You hold on to that small improvement, letting it anchor you. You know this balance is fragile and could be disrupted at any moment, but for now, it holds. You close your eyes again, aware of the quiet, living presence around you. The closeness no longer feels intrusive. It feels like a living buffer between you and the storm. Wrapped in layers and borrowed warmth, you hover in a state of fragile calm, letting the collective heat carry you forward through another stretch of the night. At some point, your attention drifts beyond the wooden walls to the animals standing just outside. You cannot see them, but you know exactly where they are, by sound and by instinct. A heavy hoof stamps the ground, breaking the crust of ice with a dull thud. An ox shifts its immense weight, causing the wet leather of its harness to creak softly. These noises arrive faintly through the canvas and the snow, muted but steady. They are the auditory signs of life continuing beyond your narrow shelter. For people traveling by wagon in the 19th century, draft animals were far more than transportation. They were companions, capital investments, and often the singular difference between survival and disaster. Period descriptions frequently mention how travelers lay awake listening for their animals, using those familiar sounds as a tether to reality. If the horses were still standing, still moving, then the night had not won yet. You find a deep, primal comfort in that logic. The wind carries a low, distant snort, followed by the soft metallic jingle of a brass buckle. The animals are cold too. Their breath steams into the storm, adding a fleeting warmth to the air around them before it is snatched away by the gale. You imagine frost collecting along their coarse winter coats, ice beads forming in their manes. Yet they endure, heads lowered, bodies angled instinctively into the wind to minimize exposure. There is something incredibly steady about their patience. You remember hearing that veteran travelers often parked wagons close together during storms, sometimes forming a tight defensive circle. The animals would be tied inside this corral or along the leeward edge, creating a living windbreak. The snow would pile against their flanks, insulating them as much as burying them. This arrangement was not elegant, but it was effective enough to become common practice on the high plains. Tonight, you picture your wagon nestled among the others, the animals standing guard in the dark like sentinels. An unusual, poignant detail appears in a handful of winter letters describing how some pioneers slept better simply knowing the animals were close enough to hear. The sounds were grounding, a reminder of the routine. In contrast, when animals wandered off or went silent, fear spread quickly. Silence in that context meant loss. You listen now, your ears tuned carefully to the frequency of the storm. Another stamp, another shift of weight. Relief follows quietly. The presence of the animals changes how you imagine the storm. It feels less abstract now. The blizzard is not just wind and snow, it is a force pressing against living bodies, testing endurance across species. You feel a strange kinship with the creatures outside. You are all waiting together, separated only by a few millimeters of canvas and rope. Your body responds to this awareness. Your breathing slows further. The tension in your shoulders eases another degree. You are not alone on this frozen stretch of land. There are massive hearts beating nearby, hooves planted stubbornly in the frozen ground. This knowledge steadies you more than you expected. There has been ongoing discussion among historians about how much attention travelers gave to animal welfare during extreme weather events. Some argue that sheer necessity forced people to prioritize human survival above all else. Others suggest that protecting the animals was inseparable from protecting oneself. Without them, the journey ended immediately. Listening to the quiet persistence outside, you lean toward the second view. Caring for the oxen was not kindness alone, it was foresight. A sudden gust rattles the harness again, louder this time. You tense briefly, then relax as the sound settles back into rhythm. The animals remain. You imagine someone earlier in the evening checking the knots, tightening the picket ropes, brushing snow from backs already dusted white. Those small acts of care echo forward into this moment, buying you a quieter night. Inside the wagon, someone stirs, perhaps responding to the same sounds. You feel the shared warmth shift slightly, then return. The animal noises blend with the wind, forming a layered soundscape that fills the dark. It is not peaceful exactly, but it is consistent, and consistency matters now. You wonder how animals experience nights like this, without the anxiety of plans or destinations, without the fear of tomorrow. They simply endure what is directly in front of them. You try to borrow that mindset. Stay still. Stay warm enough. Wait. The thought carries you into a gentler state. Your muscles loosen another degree. Your jaw unclenches. The cold remains, but it feels less personal now. The storm is simply something happening around you, not something aimed at you. A final, soft stamp reaches your ears, followed by quiet. You listen carefully, then allow your attention to drift inward again. The animals are still there. The wagon still holds. The night continues, but you feel anchored by the steady presence beyond the canvas. Wrapped in layers, surrounded by borrowed warmth and the memory of distant breath, you let that knowledge settle into your bones. You close your eyes, trusting that as long as those sounds return now and then, the world beyond the wagon is still intact. For this stretch of the night, that is enough. Hunger does not arrive loudly tonight. It settles in quietly, a low, dull awareness rather than a sharp demand. You ate earlier, you remember that, though the details feel distant now. Food on the trail was rarely about pleasure in winter. It was about timing and density. People understood, through experience more than explanation, that a full stomach helped the body hold warmth longer. That knowledge lingers in you as a faint physical reassurance. You shift slightly, feeling the heaviness inside your abdomen. It is not comfortable, but it is useful. Meals before sleep on cold nights were often thick and simple. Salt pork, hard bread softened in boiling liquid, beans cooked until they lost all shape. Such foods took longer to digest, acting like a slow-burning log in a fire, releasing energy gradually through the night. You feel that slow metabolic work happening now, a quiet furnace operating beneath your layers of cloth. Travel journals from winter crossings often mention the importance of eating even when appetite disappeared. The cold dulled the hunger signals, but skipping meals carried dangerous consequences later. You imagine someone earlier in the evening insisting everyone take a few more bites before darkness fell. At the time, it may have felt unnecessary. Now, lying still in the cold, it feels like wisdom. There is a faint taste lingering in your mouth, a mix of cured salt and hardwood smoke. You swallow slowly, your throat dry from hours of breathing the arid, cold air. The water barrel is nearby, but reaching for the ladle would mean movement, exposure, and the risk of spilling freezing liquid on your bedding. You decide against it. Dehydration is uncomfortable, but wet bedding is fatal. You settle for a small shift of your jaw, easing the dryness as best you can. One peculiar habit mentioned in a handful of accounts describes travelers chewing small bits of raw fat or tallow before sleeping in severe cold. It sounds unpleasant to modern sensibilities, but the biological logic was sound. Pure fat provided dense caloric energy and created a sense of satiety that reassured the body. Whether it truly raised the body temperature or simply comforted the mind is uncertain, but the practice appears often enough to suggest people believed it. You imagine the taste, then feel quietly grateful you do not have to resort to that tonight. Your body responds to the digestion process with a subtle internal warmth. It is not enough to chase away the chill, but it is enough to soften it. The cold at your core retreats slightly, focusing its attention again on your hands and feet. You accept this physiological trade without complaint. Warm organs matter more than warm toes. The shared space inside the wagon carries faint sounds of others settling after eating, a quiet sigh, a stomach growling briefly before quieting. These noises remind you that everyone here is relying on the same internal process, food working slowly, heat spreading carefully. There has been ongoing discussion among historians about how well 19th century travelers understood nutrition in modern terms. Calories, metabolism, and energy balance were not words they used. Yet their habits often aligned perfectly with those scientific principles. Lying here, feeling the slow burn of an earlier meal, you suspect practical experience taught lessons that theory would only explain decades later. You grow aware of how still you have become. Eating earlier has allowed you to rest more fully now. Your body feels anchored, less restless. The ache in your limbs remains, but it no longer competes with the distraction of hunger. That absence feels like a gift. Outside, the storm continues its steady pressure. Inside, digestion creates a gentle rhythm that mirrors breathing. Inhale, exhale. Warmth pulses faintly with each heartbeat. You focus on that sensation, letting it draw your attention inward, away from the frost on the canvas. Someone near you shifts, perhaps adjusting after the same realization. The warmth redistributes, then settles again. No words are exchanged. There is nothing to say. The quiet work of staying alive is happening on its own. You think briefly about the morning meal, whatever it might be. Hard bread scraped clean of mold, coffee if there is fuel to spare, and water that is not frozen solid. But that is a problem for the light. For now, the heavy comfort of the evening meal holds the cold at bay. The thought of breakfast feels abstract, almost theoretical. For now, the only meal that matters is the one already inside you, doing its slow, invisible work. Your eyelids grow heavier as your body finds a workable metabolic balance. The cold remains prowling at the edges. Dampness clings to the heavy fabric. The storm shows no sign of mercy, yet inside there is fuel. There is heat being generated quietly, steadily, without drama. You let your attention soften around the idea. Eating was not a luxury tonight, it was a tactical preparation. And as your breathing evens out, you feel that preparation paying off, carrying you gently into a deeper, calmer stretch of the night. Sleep does not arrive the way you expect it to. There is no gentle slide, no clean moment where waking thought switches off. Instead, you drift in fragments. Your eyes close, your body loosens its guard, and then something pulls you back. A sound, a shift of weight nearby, a sharper breath of cold air across your face. Each time you hover just on the edge, never fully falling, you realize that what you are doing now is not sleeping as you know it. It is something thinner, a light doze that breaks apart easily. People on the trail learned quickly that deep REM sleep was rare in conditions like this. Rest came in pieces, gathered like scraps whenever the body felt safe enough to let go for a moment. You begin to accept that pattern, letting yourself take whatever rest appears without demanding more. Your thoughts slow, but they do not stop. Images drift through your mind without narrative structure. A stretch of rutted road from earlier in the journey. A split-rail fence half buried in a drift. A memory of warmth that feels slightly exaggerated now. These thoughts do not carry emotion. They simply pass, like clouds crossing a pale winter sky. Then a gust rattles the canvas harder than before, and you wake fully again. Your muscles tighten instinctively. You listen. The wagon holds. The sound fades back into its steady rhythm. You exhale and allow your body to soften once more. This cycle repeats again and again, teaching you a rugged form of patience. You notice that your dreams, when they come, are shallow and strange. They do not build stories, they offer sensations instead. The feeling of walking without resistance, the memory of sun heat on your face, the sound of wind without the bite of cold attached to it. Each dream dissolves quickly upon waking, leaving you unsure whether it happened at all. In journals from long crossings, travelers sometimes described nights where they slept but never felt asleep. They woke exhausted, yet aware they had rested in some incomplete way. That description fits now. Your body is repairing itself in brief intervals, stitching together moments of recovery wherever it can. You become aware of how your breathing changes as you drift. It grows uneven, deeper for a few cycles, then shallow again as awareness returns. You do not fight this anymore. Fighting would keep you awake. Instead, you allow the rhythm to vary, trusting your body to find the oxygen it needs. There is a moment when you think you might finally fall fully asleep. Your limbs feel distant. The cold recedes slightly. Sound fades into a dull background hum. Then a cough breaks the quiet, sharp and sudden. You are awake again, your heart rate lifting briefly before settling. You do not feel irritation, only acceptance. This is how the night works. Later reflection by historians has complicated earlier assumptions about how much sleep mattered compared to simple rest. Looking back, it seems many people survived nights like this not by sleeping well, but by resting often, lying still, closing their eyes, conserving energy, and letting the mind wander without effort. You find yourself doing exactly that. Your body grows heavy, pressed into the layers of bedding and wood. The ache in your hip returns, but it no longer demands immediate attention. Pain becomes another background element, like the wind or the cold, present but not dominant. You adjust slightly, just enough to ease the pressure point. Then you let yourself sink again. Time loses its shape here. You cannot tell how long you have been drifting in and out. Minutes stretch into hours. Hours compress into moments. The storm outside offers no clues. Inside, the only markers are your own cycles of awareness. Awake, not awake, awake again. You notice a faint warmth spreading from your chest outward during one of these half-dreams. It does not last, but it leaves an impression. Your body is still working, still regulating, still choosing to stay alive without asking for your permission. Another fragment of sleep arrives, this one quieter. No images, just absence. When you surface again, you feel slightly more settled, as if some small repair has been made. This encourages you. You relax into the next pause more willingly. There is no frustration now, no longing for morning. only the steady task of letting go when you can and holding on when you must. This balance feels intuitive, almost ancient, as if your body remembers how to rest in difficult places. You close your eyes again, listening to the softened roar of the wind beyond the canvas. The wagon rocks gently, burdened with snow, but still standing. Wrapped in layers and borrowed warmth, you drift once more into shallow rest, gathering what sleep you can, fragment by fragment, as the long night continues. At some point, your thoughts turn toward the stories people tell when nights stretch too long. Not spoken aloud now, not in this cold, but remembered. Warnings traded around fires earlier in the journey. Half jokes, half threats. Tales of wagons lost under snow, of people who lay down to rest and didn't rise again. You did not believe all of them then. Lying here, you understand why they were told. Fear does not arrive suddenly. It seeps in the same way the cold does, quietly. You feel it as a tightening behind your ribs, a subtle alertness that refuses to fully relax. You remind yourself that fear has a purpose. It keeps you listening. It keeps you moving just enough. You let it exist without letting it grow. People on the trail carried stories the way they carried tools. They were warnings shaped into memory. A neighbor's cousin who underestimated a storm, a family that pushed on too late in the season. These accounts were rarely precise, but they served a vital function. They taught respect for weather long before meteorology had language for it. You replay one such story in your mind now, though the details are vague. Something about snow piling higher than expected, about morning light revealing only the tops of wagon bows. You imagine how quiet that must have been. The thought makes you shift slightly, checking your breathing, checking sensation in your hands. Everything responds. You are still here. One strange habit appears in a few recollections where people deliberately exaggerated dangers when speaking to newcomers. The goal was not accuracy, but caution. If fear kept someone alert through the night, it was considered useful. You wonder how many lives were saved by stories that were not entirely true. Your mind drifts toward the edges of sleep again, and the stories soften. They lose their sharpness. Fear becomes background noise, like the wind, present but no longer commanding attention. You breathe slowly, grounding yourself in physical sensation. The weight of cloth, the steady rise of your chest, the faint warmth that has not abandoned you. There is still debate among those who study these journeys about how much psychological strain contributed to failure versus physical hardship alone. Some argue that despair weakened people before the cold ever did. Others point out that fear also sharpened awareness and encouraged caution. Lying here, you feel both sides of that argument inside your own body. Fear tightens you. Fear keeps you awake. Fear keeps you alive. A sound outside shifts your attention outward again. Not the wind this time. A brief silence, then the return of movement. The storm has not ended, it has only paused. These pauses feel unsettling. You almost prefer the constant noise. Silence invites imagination. You remind yourself of what you know. The wagon is still upright. The canvas is not torn. The animals were still moving not long ago. Snow insulates as much as it burdens. These facts are small anchors you drop into the dark, giving your thoughts something solid to hold. Your breathing steadies again. The stories lose their grip. They retreat to the edges of your mind where they belong. Worry does not help you now. Awareness does. You choose awareness. The night feels longer when fear is close, but it also feels sharper. You notice details you might otherwise miss. The way the wagon shifts under snow load, the way your body signals discomfort before it becomes pain. This tension feels purposeful, not panicked. Gradually, the stories fade into the same soft blur as your dreams. The warnings merge with imagined landscapes and half-remembered roads. You are no longer replaying the dangers. You are drifting again, hovering in that thin, nebulous space between sleep and wakefulness. Fear has done its job. It kept you alert when it mattered. Now it loosens its hold. You allow your muscles to relax another degree, trusting that if danger truly arrives, your body will sound the alarm. Wrapped in layers, surrounded by breath and quiet movement, you settle back into shallow rest. The night still stretches ahead, but the stories no longer own it. For now, they are just echoes fading as you drift onward, carried by patience rather than adrenaline. You begin to sense the snow long before you see it. There is a change in the atmospheric pressure, a heaviness that feels distinct from the wind alone. The acoustic signature of the wagon shifts. It sounds deeper now, less sharp. Each gust arrives muffled, as if the entire world has been wrapped in heavy wool. The snow is no longer just passing by horizontally, it is staying. It is leaning against the wagon, settling into the corners, filling the void between the spokes. Your mind drifts to the exterior shape of your shelter. You visualize the wheels half buried, the axles disappearing into the white, the canvas edges pressed inward where the drifts have climbed high enough to meet them. People who traveled this way learned to recognize these changes by sound and feel alone. When the creaking softened and the wagon stopped rocking, it often meant the snow was building up fast, locking the wheels in place. You listen carefully, measuring each sigh of the wood. There is a duality to drifting snow, comfort and danger. Packed tightly, it blocks the biting wind and holds the escaping warmth close, acting as nature's insulation. But too much of it adds a crushing weight where the wagon was never designed to carry it. You imagine the slow, hydraulic climb of white along the sides, the way it fills gaps, smoothing sharp angles into gentle, undulating slopes. The mental image is oddly peaceful, even as it carries a silent risk. Your breath fogs inside the wagon, and the moisture freezes more quickly now. The interior feels stiller, as if the storm has wrapped you in layers of quiet. This change brings a new kind of unease. You have learned the sound of the struggle. Silence feels uncertain. You strain your ears, listening for the return of the wind, for any sign that the world outside is still moving. Trail experience taught people that heavy drifts could seal wagons shut if storms lingered. Mornings sometimes arrived with flaps frozen closed and canvas stiff as lumber. You picture hands pushing from the inside, testing the edges, hoping the weight above will shift. The image passes through your thoughts without triggering panic. You file it away, aware but calm. Someone nearby stirs, perhaps sensing the same change in the air. A hand brushes your sleeve, then withdraws. You do not react. The shared space remains steady. No one speaks, but the awareness feels collective. The wagon has become quieter, heavier, more enclosed. A small memory surfaces of a guide once explaining that a snow-covered shelter is warmer than one exposed to the air. It traps pockets of stillness, shielding what lies beneath. That idea offers comfort now. You imagine the wagon nestled inside a thick white shell, protected from the worst of the wind's reach. You let that image replace the more frightening ones. Still, the question lingers: how much is too much? The answer depends on the structural integrity of the ash boughs, the tension of the canvas, and the angle of the drift. Pioneers did not always agree on the safest approach. Some insisted on clearing snow periodically during the storm. Others waited until morning, fearing exposure more than the weight. The historical record is mixed, shaped by outcomes as much as intentions. You check in with your autonomic systems again. Fingers move when asked. Toes respond slowly, but they respond. Your core remains warm enough. These signals reassure you. You are not losing ground, you are holding steady. The sound of the storm shifts again briefly, louder, then quiet. A sheet of snow slides from somewhere above, thumping softly against the side. You tense, then relax when nothing follows. The wagon settles deeper into its temporary nest. Your breathing slows further as your surroundings grow still. The snow has changed the night's character. It feels more contained, less aggressive. The cold remains, but it presses less insistently. You take advantage of this, allowing yourself to sink into the layers beneath you. Thoughts of morning return, faint and cautious. You picture light filtering through the canvas, the snow reflecting a blinding brightness into the wagon. You imagine movement returning to stiff limbs. You do not cling to these images. You let them hover at the edge of your awareness, gentle rather than demanding. For now, you listen to the softened world outside. The storm has not ended, but it has evolved. The snow holds the wagon close, sealing it into the night. Wrapped in damp cloth and quiet breath, you rest within that stillness, trusting that the weight above will remain balanced until dawn finds you. Small sounds begin to stand out now, not because they are loud, but because the background noise has dropped away. A faint sniffle breaks the quiet. A soft, suppressed cough follows. Somewhere near the center of the wagon, a child shifts, movement that is careful but restless. You feel the vibration travel through the floorboards beneath you. True silence never comes when people share a confined space like this. Children experienced nights on the trail differently than adults. They had less patience for the enforced stillness and fewer mental tools to distract themselves from the discomfort. People who crossed these long distances learned quickly that keeping children warm and calm was a matter of group survival. Restless movements pumped cold air through the bedding. Crying exhausted precious energy. Soothing whispers, the gentle pressure of a hand, or simply pulling a small body closer into the thermal core were common responses. You sense that happening nearby now, even without seeing it. Another cough rises, deeper this time, then fades. The cold air irritates delicate throats, and the dampness makes it heavier. You notice your own throat feels tight, not painful, just dry and sensitive. You swallow slowly and breathe through the cloth again, pre-warming the air before it reaches your lungs. This habit has become automatic. There is a soft whimper, quickly hushed. A child half awake, caught in the limbo between fear and fatigue. Someone murmurs words of reassurance, too, quiet to decipher, but the tone is unmistakable. The sound blends into the fabric and the breath around you. You feel a subtle shift of warmth as bodies draw closer together instinctively, forming a human barrier against the draft. People who traveled in these conditions understood that nights were hardest for the young. The cold bit sharper on smaller bodies with less mass. Sleep came and went more easily, but stayed less. You imagined the immense effort it took for parents to keep children still enough to conserve heat without frightening them further. It was a delicate balance, managed one whisper at a time. Your own rest wavers as these sounds ripple through the wagon. You do not resent them. They feel like proof of life. Each cough, each small movement confirms that the group is still functioning, still awake enough to respond. The alternative, silence, would be far worse. You notice how the noises change the atmosphere inside. The shared space tightens slightly, as if everyone is listening. Breath quiets, movement slows. Even the storm outside feels distant now, softened by the snow and absorbed by the attention focused inward. A small hand brushes against your sleeve accidentally, then pulls away. The touch is brief, almost apologetic. You do not move away. Warmth holds better when the seal is unbroken. After a moment, the child settles again, breathing unevenly but calmly. Later observers have tried to understand how families managed nights like this without breaking down from exhaustion. Some believe rigid routine mattered most. Others think simple physical closeness made the difference. Lying here, you sense it was often pure improvisation, responding to whatever sound or movement arose, meeting it with patience rather than plans. Your muscles relax again as the quiet returns. The ache in your shoulders dulls into the background. The wagon seems to breathe with its occupants, expanding and contracting in tiny thermal increments. Even the discomfort feels shared, distributed across the collective bodies and breath. Another cough sounds, farther away this time. Someone shifts a heavy blanket. The noise fades. The stillness returns, fragile but intact.
You allow yourself to drift again, trusting that if the restlessness returns, it will be met. Your thoughts soften. You feel the slow, magnetic pull of shallow sleep resume. The presence of others, especially the small and restless ones, no longer pulls you fully awake. It becomes part of the night's texture, like the wind or the cold. Wrapped in layers, surrounded by quiet vigilance, you rest again. The wagon holds its people close. Each sound rises and falls without panic. In this shared shelter, even restlessness finds its place. And the long night continues, carried forward by patience and breath. As the night stretches on, your awareness turns inward, not out of anxiety, but out of quiet biological observation. You begin to notice the microscopic calculations your body is making without asking for your permission. Heat gathers in your core and retreats from your fingertips. Blood shifts its loyalties, favoring the vital organs over the extremities. You feel it as a dull, localized heaviness in your limbs, a sense that your hands and feet belong slightly less to you than they did an hour ago.
You test the sensation again, gently. A slow, deliberate curl of your toes inside your boots. A careful flex of your stiffening fingers. The neural responses are delayed, like an echo, but they are present. That matters. People who lived through winters on the high plains learned to read these signals intuitively. Warmth was never evenly distributed. Survival meant accepting that some parts of you would suffer so that others could endure. Your legs feel thick, as if wrapped in lead rather than wool. The deep ache in your joints intensifies, settling into the marrow of the bone. You shift a fraction of an inch to redistribute the pressure, then stop immediately. Too much movement would fracture the fragile shell of warmth you have built. You choose stillness again, letting the discomfort exist without chasing it away. There is an odd, clinical calm that comes with this awareness. You are no longer guessing what your body needs. You are listening to it. The message is simple and binary. Stay steady. Do not waste energy. Breathe slowly. These instructions repeat themselves quietly, guiding you through the dark hours.
People crossing long distances in the 19th century understood circulation long before they understood the science of hemodynamics. They knew that numbness was a warning light, but not always an emergency. A pins and needles tingling meant blood was fighting its way back. Complete loss of feeling, however, meant action was required. You pay close attention now, monitoring the changes without alarm. A faint warmth pulses with each heartbeat. You focus on it, letting it anchor you. That rhythm feels dependable, even comforting. Outside, the storm still presses against the world. Inside, your body continues its quiet, autonomous work, adjusting, prioritizing, enduring. You notice that your face feels colder than before. The cheeks, exposed to the damp air, have surrendered their warmth to the darkness. You pull the rough fabric higher, covering more skin until only your eyes remain exposed. Breathing becomes slightly more restricted, but the air is warmer. You accept the trade-off again. Comfort is always conditional tonight. Your thoughts drift briefly toward the concept of morning, then pull back sharply.
Thinking too far ahead feels dangerous, unhelpful. Instead, you concentrate on the immediate, the next few breaths, the next small check-in with your fingers, the next moment of stillness. Time has narrowed down to these tiny intervals. There was never universal agreement among those who later studied trail hardships about exactly how much cold the human body could endure without lasting harm. Accounts varied widely. Some people emerged from these nights stiff but intact. Others carried the ghost of the pain for years in their joints. Lying here, you feel how thin that line can be. You hope you are staying on the safer side of it. Your muscles twitch once, involuntarily. A brief, violent shiver runs through your torso, then stops. Shivering means heat is being generated through friction. That knowledge reassures you. The body has not given up. It is still fighting in its own quiet, mechanical way. Someone nearby shifts, perhaps responding to a similar signal. The shared warmth of the group adjusts slightly, like water in a tilting bowl, then settles. You sense how interconnected these small biological systems have become. One person moves, and everyone feels the draft. One person grows colder, and the collective balance shifts. You think about how much of this experience would be invisible from the outside. A wagon buried in snow looks still, silent, dead. Inside, countless tiny adjustments are happening every second. Muscles tensing, blood moving, breath slowing. Survival unfolds without spectacle. Your breathing deepens slightly, slower now than earlier in the night. Each inhale feels measured, precious. Each exhale carries warmth out into the damp air. You no longer mind the moisture. It is part of the system now, part of the environment you have adapted to. There is a moment when your fingers feel almost warm again, not truly warm, but less distant. You flex them once more, then let them rest. This small improvement feels meaningful. You store it away as evidence that your efforts are working. The ache in your hips returns, sharper for a few moments, then dulls into the background noise of your nervous system. You do not move. Pain, like cold, can be managed if it does not surprise you. You breathe through it. Your body feels heavier now, more anchored to the floorboards. This is not sleep exactly, but it is close. It is a metabolic state where awareness narrows and effort softens. You hover there, trusting your instincts to wake you if the threshold is crossed. Wrapped in layers, surrounded by quiet breath and steady presence, you allow your body to continue its calculations without interference. Blood flows where it must. Heat is guarded like gold. You remain still, patient, letting the night pass one small biological adjustment at a time. At some point, the physical effort gives way to something quieter. Not sleep, but a mental settling that feels just as vital. You stop actively tracking every sensation. Instead, you allow familiar habits to take over. Thoughts turn toward phrases remembered from home, a line of scripture repeated so often it no longer needs words to carry weight, a routine from another life played back gently in the dark. People facing nights like this often leaned on whatever internal structures they had built long before the journey began.
Some whispered prayers under their breath. Others counted breaths or recited bits of folk songs, not for the meaning necessarily, but for the rhythm. Repetition steadies the mind when the body is under strain. You find yourself returning to the same thought again and again, letting it loop without effort. The wagon feels smaller now, not because it has physically changed, but because your scope of attention has narrowed. You are no longer cataloging sounds or sensations. You are allowing them to pass without response. The wind presses, the canvas shifts, someone breathes nearby. These things happen, and you let them. A memory surfaces of being told that worry burns energy faster than cold ever could. Whether that was medical advice or superstition hardly matters. It feels true tonight. You let go of the questions you cannot answer. Will the storm last until morning? Will the snow hold? Will everyone wake? These thoughts fade, replaced by simpler imperatives. Breathe. Stay still. For many travelers, faith was not dramatic or loud. It was practical, a tool to accept uncertainty without fighting it. Even those who did not consider themselves deeply religious often repeated familiar phrases in moments like this. Habit carries comfort. Familiar words anchor the drifting attention. You feel that anchoring now, subtle but real. Your jaw unclenches. Your shoulders sink slightly deeper into the layers of cloth. The ache remains, but it no longer dominates your consciousness. There is space around it now, room enough for calm to exist alongside discomfort. This balance feels sustainable. Looking back, it is difficult to say how much belief itself mattered versus the simple act of focusing the mind. Some people credited prayer with their survival. Others spoke only of stubborn endurance. The distinction blurs in moments like this. What matters is that the mind finds a place to rest even when the body cannot. You notice that your breathing has fallen into a steady pattern without conscious effort. Inhale through the cloth. Exhale slowly. Pause. The rhythm repeats, gentle and predictable as a metronome. Each cycle feels like a small reassurance that things are still working as they should. A quiet murmur passes through the wagon, perhaps someone else repeating something familiar to them. It is not loud enough to form words. It fades quickly, leaving behind a sense of shared calm. No one needs to know what the other is thinking. The act itself is enough. The storm outside has settled into a deeper hush. The accumulated snow absorbs the sound. The wind loses its cutting edge. The wagon feels held rather than battered. You register this change without excitement. It simply becomes part of the background, another condition you accept. Your thoughts slow further. Images lose their detail. Sensations blur at the edges. You are no longer counting time. You are inhabiting it.
This feels like the closest thing to rest the night has offered. There is a subtle shift in your chest, a warmth that lingers a little longer than before. You focus on it briefly, then let it go. Attention, like energy, must be spent carefully. You choose to spend it on calm. Wrapped in layers, surrounded by quiet presence, you settle into this mental stillness. Faith, habit, routine, memory, they blend together now, forming a soft structure that holds you upright through the remaining hours. The night continues, but it feels less heavy, carried now by repetition and patience rather than effort alone. Time loosens its grip on you somewhere in the middle of the dark. Not because the hours have passed quickly, but because you have finally stopped measuring them. You no longer wonder how long you have been awake or how much longer remains. Awareness thins, stretching out like a quiet watch that never quite ends. You are not asleep, but you are not fully present either. This is the physiological state people slipped into during long winter nights on the trail, a suspended animation. Anyone who had endured a season like this understood that true rest often came in vigilance rather than dreams. Someone was always half listening, half ready.
Even when eyes were closed, attention hovered close to the surface, ready to rise like a fish at the smallest change. You notice it in yourself now. A sound shifts outside, and your eyes open instantly, not in fear, just readiness. The wind presses differently against the canvas, then eases. A slab of snow slides somewhere near the wheels. You register it, assess it, then let your eyelids fall again. This rhythm repeats so often it begins to feel natural. Wake, listen, rest. Your body feels heavy, anchored by layers and fatigue, yet your senses remain surprisingly sharp. You notice when the breathing of the person nearby changes pace, when a shared warmth cools slightly, when the wagon settles deeper into the snowpack. None of this pulls you fully awake. It simply passes through your awareness like ripples on water. People often describe these hours as the hardest to recall later, not because nothing happened, but because nothing stood out. Memory prefers contrast, danger, or relief. These hours offer neither. They are made of quiet endurance stitched together by half-conscious moments. You shift your weight, carefully responding to a dull ache along your side. The movement is slow, almost ritualistic. You know exactly how much you can move without breaking the seal of warmth. That knowledge feels earned now, learned through hours of trial and adjustment. You settle again, listening for reactions around you. None come. The balance holds. Outside, the storm continues, but it no longer feels like an opponent. It feels like a condition, something that exists alongside you rather than against you. Snow presses, wind moves, cold remains. These are facts now, not threats. Accepting them has changed how they feel. Your breathing stays steady, rising and falling with practiced ease. You no longer count breaths. The autonomic nervous system has taken over that task entirely. Each inhale warms slightly before reaching your lungs. Each exhale carries moisture into the air that immediately claims it. The cycle repeats without complaint. A faint movement nearby draws your attention. Someone adjusts their position, careful and practiced. You sense the shared warmth shift, then settle again. No words are exchanged. There is no need. Everyone here understands the rules by now. Move only when necessary. Move slowly. Return to stillness. Looking back on accounts of nights like this, it becomes clear that many people remembered them less for what happened
and more for how they felt afterward. The stiffness, the deep fatigue, the strange hollow calm that followed survival. What mattered in the moment rarely translated into dramatic stories. It translated into sore joints and quiet gratitude. You drift again into that thin space where thoughts lose structure. Images appear without meaning. A pale sky, a line of fence posts, a fire glowing low. They pass without pulling you deeper. Your mind is resting in fragments, just as your body is. Another pause in the storm catches your attention. The wind eases for several breaths. Silence grows heavier than noise. You listen carefully, alert to what might follow. When the wind returns, softer this time, you relax. The pattern continues. Tension, release, awareness, rest. There was never a single explanation that fit every survival story from the trail. Some credited luck. Others pointed to preparation. Many spoke only of stubbornness. Lying here, you feel how all of those blend together. Preparation got you this far. Stubbornness keeps you still. Luck holds the wagon upright beneath the weight of snow. Your muscles twitch once, then settle. A reflexive check. Everything responds. You let the moment pass without concern. The body knows how to monitor itself even now. The hours stretch on, but they feel lighter. Not easier, but quieter. The cold no longer surprises you. The noise no longer startles. You have adapted to the night's rules, and that adaptation brings a kind of peace. You notice that your jaw is unclenched. Your brow is smooth. These small details matter. They tell you that effort has eased, that endurance has shifted into maintenance. You are no longer fighting the night. You are coexisting with it. Breath after breath, moment after moment, the watch continues. Not dramatic, not heroic, simply present. You remain in this half-awake state, listening and resting. At the same time, trusting that if the night demands more of you, you will respond. For now, it asks only patience, and so you remain still, wrapped in cloth and quiet vigilance, letting the long middle hours pass without resistance, waiting for the first hint that the night is finally beginning to loosen its hold. Thoughts drift toward failure now, not sharply, but as a quiet awareness that not every night like this ended well. You do not dwell on it, yet it lingers at the edges of your mind like smoke. The wagon feels solid beneath you, but you know that others, somewhere else in other winters, lay down in similar shelters and did not wake as expected. This knowledge is not meant to frighten you. It is simply part of the landscape of memory that surrounds journeys like this. People who traveled these routes understood risk without always naming it. They knew wagons could collapse under snow if the boughs weakened or the ropes loosened. They knew animals could break free in panic. They knew cold could steal strength quietly. These lessons were not learned from manuals. They were learned from watching and from loss. You feel that inherited awareness now, steady rather than dramatic. You listen again to the wagon itself, the way it settles, the way it holds. The creaks you hear are familiar now, almost comforting. None sound sharp or sudden. None suggest strain beyond what the structure has already endured. You allow yourself to trust that assessment, knowing trust is sometimes the only option left. There were nights when people misjudged storms, believing they would pass quickly. Some pressed on when they should have stopped. Others stopped when moving might have kept them warmer. Looking back, it is impossible to draw clean rules from these choices. Outcomes depended on weather, terrain, timing, and luck. You lie still, aware that this pause, this decision to endure rather than move, was made earlier and cannot be changed now. Your body feels stiff, but not failing. That distinction matters. You check sensation again, slower this time.
Fingers respond. Toes complain, but they respond. Your breathing remains steady. These signals tell you that the night, difficult as it is, has not crossed a critical line. A faint sound outside reaches you, not wind, something heavier, snow shifting under its own weight. You tense briefly, then listen as the sound settles into silence. No collapse follows. The wagon remains balanced. You release the breath you had held unconsciously. In later years, people told stories about nights like this with a clarity that likely did not exist in the moment. Memory simplifies. It highlights danger or relief and smooths out the long stretches of waiting. Right now, there is no clarity, only the steady presence of cold, the weight of snow, and the quiet determination to remain. You notice how your thoughts no longer jump easily. Fatigue has softened their edges. Even the idea of danger feels distant, abstract. This is not denial. It is conservation. The mind, like the body, has limits on what it can hold at once. Someone near you shifts again, then stills. The shared warmth adjusts. The wagon creaks softly. Everything settles back into place. These small movements reassure you more than they disturb you. They confirm that life inside the wagon continues. You consider how fragile this shelter truly is. Canvas stretched over wood, rope tied by human hands, wheels meant for rolling, not bearing snow. And yet, it holds. Not perfectly, not comfortably, but enough. Enough is the measure that matters tonight. There is no single explanation that accounts for who survived nights like this and who did not. Preparation mattered. Decisions mattered. Circumstances mattered. Sometimes none of those were enough. Lying here, you accept that uncertainty without trying to solve it. Acceptance feels quieter than fear. Your breathing deepens again, slower now, heavier. The ache in your joints feels older, less sharp. You no longer shift to chase comfort. You let discomfort exist alongside calm. This balance feels earned. Outside, the storm has softened further, not ended, but changed its disposition. The heavy snow absorbs the sound. The wind presses gently instead of striking. You sense that the night is moving toward a different phase. Not morning yet, but something closer to it. You hold on to that thought lightly. Too much hope can be exhausting. Instead, you focus on staying exactly as you are. Warm enough, aware enough, patient enough. The wagon stands. Your body holds. The night continues, but it no longer feels endless. Wrapped in layers and quiet resolve, you remain still, knowing that endurance is not about strength alone, but about staying present until the world allows you to move again. You sense the change before you see it. There is a thinning in the darkness, a subtle shift that has nothing to do with sound. Your eyes are still closed, yet something feels different against your eyelids. The air inside the wagon seems less heavy. The silence has a new quality to it, not empty, but expectant. Morning is not here yet, but it is moving closer. The canvas above you begins to glow faintly, not with color, but with the absence of total darkness. The snow outside reflects what little light exists, sending it back through the fabric in a muted, ghostly wash. You open your eyes slowly, careful not to move more than necessary. Shapes are still vague, edges blur, but you can tell where the roof curves now. You can tell where the sidewalls rise.
People who slept through winter storms on the trail often described this moment as the first real relief. Not warmth, not safety, just light. Light meant the world had not ended in the night. It meant there would be something to respond to. You feel that reassurance settle into you now, quiet and steady. Your body resists movement at first. Stiffness has taken hold. Muscles feel dense, reluctant to fire. You test a hand, lifting it a few inches before letting it fall back into the layers. Sensation returns slowly, accompanied by a dull, throbbing ache. This is expected. Cold nights leave their mark in this way. You accept it without frustration. The wagon creaks softly as snow shifts outside. You imagine a drift slumping slightly as temperatures change. Nothing collapses, nothing tears. The structure holds as it has all night. That realization brings a deeper breath, fuller than any you've taken in hours. You become aware of others stirring around you, not all at once. A sigh here, a slow stretch there. Someone clears their throat. The shared warmth begins to break apart as people test movement. This redistribution of heat brings a brief wave of cold, sharper now that the stillness has ended. You brace against it, knowing it will pass. Outside, the storm has quieted into something gentler. The wind still moves, but it lacks urgency. Snow rests where it fell. The violence of the night has given way to a heavy, white calm. You imagine the landscape buried and reshaped, familiar landmarks erased beneath the drifts. There is a faint sound of an animal shifting nearby, a hoof scraping, a low, steaming breath. Relief follows immediately. The animals endured too. That fact carries immense weight. If they are standing, the night truly is ending. You notice moisture frozen stiff along the canvas seams. The fabric looks heavier, sagging slightly under the burden of ice and snow. You think about the work that will be required soon. Clearing drifts, checking harnesses, restoring movement to limbs that feel barely cooperative. These tasks wait patiently. For now, you remain still a moment longer. Many accounts from winter travel mention how difficult it was to leave the warmth of shared stillness, even when daylight arrived. Moving meant exposure again, cold air rushing into damp clothing, pain blooming in joints. You feel that reluctance now. You savor the last seconds of rest before action becomes necessary. Light grows stronger, filtering through the canvas in a soft gray glow. You can see your breath clearly now, rising and fading in rhythmic plumes. The interior of the wagon feels smaller in the daylight, more clearly defined. There is less mystery here, less imagination. That clarity feels grounding. You begin to shift more deliberately, bending a knee, rolling a shoulder. Each movement sends a brief protest through your body, then eases. Blood returns where it had withdrawn. Tingling replaces numbness. You welcome the sensation, even when it borders on uncomfortable. Someone nearby speaks softly for the first time in hours. Just a word or two, a check-in. The sound feels almost startling after so much quiet. You realize how long it has been since voices mattered. Now they return, tentative but real. The first true sign of morning arrives when the light touches the lower edge of the canvas, brightening it slightly more than the rest. This tells you the sun is rising beyond the drifts. You picture it climbing slowly, indifferent to the struggle of the night before. You take a deeper breath, filling your lungs with the cold, damp air. It stings slightly, but it feels clean compared to the heaviness of the night. You let it out slowly,
grounding yourself in the present moment. Morning has not solved anything yet. The snow still waits, the cold remains, the work ahead is real. But you have crossed the night. That fact settles into you with quiet satisfaction. Wrapped in layers, stiff and tired, you lie there for a final moment, letting light replace darkness inch by inch. The blizzard did not take you. The wagon held.
Your body endured. And as the gray glow grows brighter, you prepare to meet whatever this new day asks of you. When you finally push yourself toward movement, it feels like waking a body that does not entirely belong to you yet. Limbs respond slowly, as if they have been loaned out overnight and only just returned. You brace a hand against the wagon floor and sit up a fraction, then pause. The cold rushes in immediately, sharper now that the stillness is broken. You breathe through it, letting the sensation settle rather than fighting it. The canvas doors nudged aside and daylight spills in, pale and reflective. Snow has climbed higher along the wagon's sides, smoothing edges and swallowing tracks. The world outside looks unfamiliar, reshaped into gentle slopes and rounded forms. What was once a road is now only a suggestion buried beneath white. You take a moment to look without standing, letting your eyes adjust before your body has to. Someone steps down from the wagon ahead of you.
Their boots disappear almost to the ankle. The sound is a soft crunch, followed by a slow, careful shift of weight. Snow resists movement at first, then gives way reluctantly. You imagine how heavy it must be, how much energy each step will cost. The thought makes you move deliberately, conserving strength. Even now, when you finally lower yourself down, the cold feels different. It is no longer creeping, it is direct and immediate. The air bites at your face and hands. Your breath fogs instantly, rising and vanishing in thick clouds. You stand still for a moment, letting your body register this new version of cold, recalibrating after hours of enclosure. The animals come into view next. Frost clings to their coats. Snow has gathered along their backs and flanks, outlining muscle beneath ice. They look tired but upright. Heads lift slowly, ears flick. The simple fact that they are standing carries relief. You feel it settle in your chest heavier than words. Around you, others begin to move, each at their own pace. Some stretch carefully.
Some go straight to work, hands reaching for shovels or boards. No one rushes. Cold punishes haste. You sense an unspoken understanding that the morning must be met gently, even though there is much to do. Snow slides from the canvas in heavy sheets as someone shakes it loose. The sound is abrupt, startling after the muffled quiet of the night. You flinch, then relax. The wagon lightens slightly, rising a fraction as the weight is removed. That small shift feels like a release of breath the structure itself has been holding. You test your footing, shifting weight from one leg to the other. Blood returns in waves, tingling sharply before easing. It is uncomfortable, almost painful, but it signals that circulation is finding its way back. You flex your fingers again, watching color slowly return. The stiffness will linger, but it will loosen with time. The work begins without ceremony. Snow is cleared from around wheels. Ropes are checked. Harnesses are examined for ice and wear. Movements are methodical, practiced. There is no need for instruction. Each person knows their part, guided by habit rather than discussion. You join in where you can, lifting lighter loads at first, letting strength return gradually. As the wagon emerges from its white cocoon, the scale of the storm becomes clearer. Drifts stretch in uneven waves. Familiar shapes are softened,
almost erased. It is difficult to tell where ground ends and sky begins when everything reflects the same pale light. You orient yourself slowly using nearby wagons, trees, or hills as reference points. Cold clings stubbornly to damp fabric. Sleeves are stiff. Gloves resist bending. You shake your hands gently, loosening ice crystals that formed overnight. Each small motion sends a faint spray of frost into the air. It catches the light briefly, then disappears. There is a strange, quiet satisfaction in this work, clearing snow, restoring order. It feels like reclaiming something that was taken temporarily. The storm had its night. Now it is your turn again. This shift feels important, even if it happens without words.
Someone laughs softly at a minor mishap, a boot slipping, quickly recovered. The sound feels surprising, almost out of place, but welcome. It breaks the spell of the night completely. You realize how long it has been since anything felt light. The sun climbs higher, though it offers little warmth yet. Its presence is enough. Shadows sharpen, details emerge. The world regains definition. You feel your shoulders relax slightly, tension easing as visibility improves. The unknown has retreated. You pause to drink at last, careful and measured. The water is cold enough to sting your teeth, but it refreshes you deeply. Your throat relaxes. Your body seems to accept this small kindness with gratitude. As the wagon is prepared to move again, you take one last look at the place where you spent the night. It looks ordinary now, just another stretch of land, quiet and white. Nothing about it suggests what it demanded from you hours earlier. That contrast feels strange, almost unsettling. You climb back into the wagon with more confidence this time, muscles responding more readily. The space feels different in daylight, smaller, more familiar, less threatening. You settle among the supplies, aware of how close you came to knowing it too well. The animals are hitched slowly, patiently. Steam rises from their bodies as they shift. The sound of harness leather moving feels comforting, familiar. It signals readiness, continuation. When the wagon finally lurches forward, the movement feels both jarring and relieving. Wheels protest briefly, then begin to roll. Snow crunches beneath them. The journey resumes, altered but intact. You sit quietly as the landscape begins to slide past again, mind still heavy with the memory of the night. It will linger, you know, in stiffness, in caution, in a deeper respect for weather that does not announce itself. For now, you focus on the rhythm of movement returning. The wagon creaks. The road, however faint, reappears. You are moving again, and that feels like the clearest proof that the night is finally behind you. Long after the wagon has found its rhythm again, the night stays with you. It does not linger as fear, but as a quiet imprint, something your body remembers, even when your thoughts move on. Each jolt of the wheels sends a reminder through stiff joints. Each breath of cold air carries an echo of canvas snapping in the dark. You sit still, letting movement do its work, letting warmth return gradually rather than forcing it. The landscape slides past in pale silence. Snow reflects light upward, softening shadows, muting distance. The world looks gentler than it felt hours ago. You notice how easily danger hides once daylight arrives. The same drifts that pressed against the wagon now seem almost peaceful. It takes effort to remember how heavy they were in the night. As the morning unfolds, conversation returns in fragments. Short observations, practical comments. Nothing about fear or hardship. People rarely speak of nights like that while they are still fresh. There is an instinct to keep moving, to place distance between experience and memory before it hardens. You feel that instinct too. You focus on small tasks, adjusting a blanket, checking supplies, watching the animals pull steadily forward. These simple actions help settle your thoughts. They remind you that the journey continues regardless of what it demanded from you along the way.
Over time, the stiffness eases. Blood flows more freely. Sensation returns fully to fingers and toes. Pain dulls into background soreness. You know it will resurface later, perhaps in the evening, perhaps days from now. Nights like that leave marks that do not fade quickly. Still, you are grateful for movement, for sunlight, for the sound of progress. You imagine yourself years from now recalling this night in pieces, not the entire stretch of hours, but moments. The sound of wind against canvas, the way breath fogged in the dark, the faint glow of morning through snow. Memory will simplify it. It always does. It will turn endurance into a single story easier to carry than the truth. Others around you will remember it differently. Some will recall the cold most clearly, others the silence, others the work in the morning. No two memories will match exactly. That feels right. Experience fragments as it passes through people. The wagon creaks again, a familiar sound now, no longer ominous. It reminds you that this shelter, imperfect as it is, carried you through something that could have ended differently. Respect for it settles quietly into you, for its flaws and its strength. As the sun climbs higher, the day grows brighter, but not warmer. Winter holds its ground. You do not expect comfort from it anymore. Expectation has shifted. You know now what cold asks of you: patience, stillness, attention. These lessons stay close. You find your thoughts drifting less often toward fear and more toward gratitude. Not dramatic gratitude, just a steady appreciation for small things that held. Rope that did not snap, canvas that did not tear, bodies that continued to breathe through the long dark. The road ahead remains uncertain. More storms will come. More nights will test endurance in different ways. This one has joined the collection. Another quiet proof that you can remain present through discomfort without being consumed by it. Eventually, the memory of the blizzard softens into something almost distant. The wagon moves, the day unfolds, tasks fill the hours, but beneath it all, the night has left a trace, a deeper respect for shelter, a sharper awareness of breath, a calm understanding that survival is often quiet, made of small choices repeated until light returns. As the wheels turn and the landscape opens ahead, you rest back against the supplies, letting the motion soothe what the night tightened. You do not rush the feeling away. You let it settle where it belongs. Part of the journey now, carried forward with you as proof that you stayed, listened, and endured. Now the day carries you forward, and the memory of the night begins to loosen its grip. The cold fades into a background awareness. Muscles relax. Breath deepens. You no longer need to stay alert in the same way. The storm has passed, and with it, the need for constant vigilance. As you settle into this calmer stretch, allow your own body to do the same. Let shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. Notice how steady breathing feels when it is no longer measured against survival. Nights like that remind you how much the body knows on its own, how quietly it works to protect you when you allow it to. If you are listening to this as you drift towards sleep, take a moment now to rest in that same safety. The wind has eased. The shelter holds. Nothing is asking more of you tonight. You can let go. Sweet dreams.